All right, let's start with the big story that we are tracking at this hour, where it is often said that there are two sides to every story. Now, the Rohingya crisis is no different. A narrative was built over the last several months, beginning from the month of September last year, a narrative that the Rohingya Muslim minorities were driven out of Myanmar due to the persecution that they faced from the Myanmarese army, and the world was obliged to give them refuge. Now, what was lost in the narrative was also the fact that some among the Rohingya community reportedly have also killed the Rohingya Hindus. Now, it's being said that some members of a group that is known as the Rohingya Salvation Army triggered the face-off with the Myanmar military, and it could also be argued that Myanmar's military response was disproportionate. Now, much has been written and said about it, and what no one has been talking about is the fate of the 99 Hindus of the Maungdaw town of Myanmar. Now, last year we showed you the mass graves where Hindus were buried, and now it is confirmed. Even Amnesty International, in a report that it has filed, has confirmed that some from the Rohingya Muslims had actually slaughtered at least about 53 Rohingya Hindus, and these members who carried out this massacre are said to be from the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. Now, the incident is reportedly taken place in the Khamong Sheikh village in northern Maungdaw, and also what is more is that most of the 100 murdered Hindus are said to be children, involved children as well. Now, the killings happened reportedly on the 25th of August last year, the same day that the Rohingya terrorists staged the deadly attacks on the Myanmar police posts. So should there be any surprise then, as the Indian government is reluctant to grant refugee status to the Rohingyas? Now, is it not possible that hardened terrorists could have potentially mixed with the Rohingyas who are seeking refuge and asylum into India, away from the persecution that they're facing in Myanmar? And also, have Rohingyas not brought upon themselves the crisis by taking up arms and killing the innocent Hindus and also their children? All right, now last year, remember, WION had reported the killing of the Hindus by the Rohingyas. Take a look at this report.
We have heard about Rohingya Muslims coming from Myanmar to Bangladesh, fleeing the persecution that they have been facing for decades. But we have not heard much about the Hindus from Myanmar who have been fleeing the similar persecution and have sought shelter in Bangladesh in the similar places across Okhia and Cox's Bazar. One of such persons is Chittoranjan Pal, who we are going to speak to.
An insurgent group has waged a movement against the government in Myanmar. We moved to Bangladesh in the face of their atrocities. This group had confined us for 8 days in our village and did not let us go outside for groceries or even to get water. After some days, we got to know that they had killed many Burmese Hindus in Fakira Bazar, which is 2 kilometers away from our village.
An estimated 500 Hindus have fled to Bangladesh since the violence erupted in Myanmar. The Myanmar government identifies the Hindus as Indians.
The Burmese government gave us a card which says we are Indian. We go by that card.
The misery of identification does not end there. Since the violence erupted in the last week of August, insurgent groups in Myanmar have killed at least 86 members of their community.
They hacked my husband to death, looted my house and husband's jewelry store. They had black outfits and faces covered, so we could not identify them. They killed all the people of my area. A Muslim family helped us to escape to this camp because we promised them we would convert to their religion.
The flight of so many Rohingya and Hindus to Bangladesh has sent prices of essentials such as rice soaring. Even plastic sheets and bamboo for building makeshift shelters have shot up.
The cost of living has increased in Okhia, Cox's Bazar. This is one of the most impoverished areas of Bangladesh. The camps of plastic sheets and bamboos are increasing every passing hour. This has also increased some business for the locals here. On the other end, the Myanmar migrants say they're pushed into the misery for no fault of theirs. Whether it is the insurgents or the Myanmar army, these people are simply victims of a bloody civil war in Myanmar. In Ukhia, Cox's Bazar, South Hamadi, WION.
All right, so that was the report that we had filed in the month of September last year in the immediate aftermath of the exodus because of the crackdown by the Myanmarese army. And to discuss as to what exactly has happened so far and about the many nuances that are involved in what is actually happening with the Rohingyas in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, and also those who've sought refuge in India, we are joined in by a panel of experts. In the studio, we are joined in by former diplomat, former ambassador to Myanmar, Mr. G. Parthasarthi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And we're also joined in from Dhaka by Saad Hamadi, our correspondent, the Dhaka bureau chief, who had filed the report in the month of September last year. And also from the WION's international desk, we are joined in by senior international affairs correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran. But let me start with you, Parthasarthi. Now, this is not an easy issue. It's an extremely complex issue. The violence that we saw started in the month of August last year. And post that, there is much that's been spoken of. We've spoken a lot about the Rohingya Muslims who've been persecuted, but also about the Rohingya Hindus whose mass grave has now been found. And also Amnesty International has put out this report where it claims that 99 Rohingya Hindus were also massacred, reportedly by the Rohingya Muslims. What do you make of this?
Look, the situation, what is called as the Rakhine province, has been very complicated. Since the 19th century, that area has been populated by people moving in from what is now Bangladesh and what is now India. They are predominantly Muslim, but for India strategically, that corridor is vital because the corridor through the Rohingya areas runs to the sea from Mizoram. So connecting the sea to our states to the sea is important. The problem itself arises from the fact that Myanmar has, since its independence, never been clear about granting citizenship to people outside the country who came in during British times. With some difficulty, we have managed to arrange through the 60s for Hindus and Indians, in fact, Hindus, irrespective of religion, to get citizenship where they so chose to have. Rohin, the problem in Rakhine state has been very difficult. Because they were not assimilated and Myanmar never accepted them as citizens, and that became clear in 1982. How do they treat them? They don't have citizenship. Now, at some stage or the other, into the 1990s, the Rohingyas, as they are called, but they are really from Indian extraction, from largely Bangladesh and India, they took to arms. They were armed and trained along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border.
So this development took place, the formation of the Arakan Salvation Rohingya Army took place in 2012-2013.
No, much before that. They were also going for training and arms. There was an armed insurrection of sorts. And they joined in with other Myanmar armed groups. There are armed groups all across Myanmar. The recent incidents were triggered by the killing of the Myanmar forces. They reacted, I think, somewhat disproportionately. But the fundamentalists in the Rohingya society had also become very hardcore fanatics. The Hindus were not with them. Anyone not with them is inconvenient, and they were disposed of. And I think we should be very careful. India and Bangladesh we have a similar policy.
That's interesting. India and Bangladesh have very similar policies.
Because Bangladesh was not responsible for this fundamentalism. These guys were trained on the AFPAC border, and they got radicalized there. There were some Bangladesh groups like the Jamaat-ul Mujahideen who had links with them, but that was not the root cause. Khalida Zia's government had a different approach, but under Sheikh Hasina, they have not interfered.
They have not interfered.
The flow of refugees largely arose from the actions of the Myanmar army, and you have to find a way out.
All right.
As far as India is concerned...
We'll talk about what India's role is, but let me bring in Ramesh Ramachandran in this. Now, Ramesh, this report that's been filed by Amnesty International, where it claims that 99 Rohingya Hindus were massacred by some members of the Rohingya Muslims. What do you make of this?
Indeed, Mohammed. Now, this report by Amnesty lays out in graphic detail the minute details of the attacks, a wave of attacks, incidentally, on the 25th and 26th of August last year. This was the time the massacre actually began in right earnest. And it's, specific details emerge from the report, which says that about on the 25th, the ARSA attacked the Hindu community and killed almost 50 people. And the very next day, again, they entered another township, another village in Maungdaw, and killed almost an equal number. So by Amnesty's observation, it says this amounts to crimes against humanity carried out by Myanmar security forces in northern Rakhine state. And they go on to say, in this brutal and senseless act, members of the ARSA captured scores of Hindu women, men and children and terrorized them before slaughtering them outside their own villages. The perpetrators of this heinous crime must be held to account. That's the statement coming out of the Amnesty spokesperson here as well.
Absolutely indeed, Ramesh. Do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, let me get in our Dhaka Bureau Chief, Saad Mahdi. Now, Saad, you had reported on this story last year in the month of September. And let's also point out to our viewers that media access into Myanmar, into places where these mass graves has been found, is extremely limited. Some have also suggested that the spin that the Myanmarese government is actually giving to this entire story is to try and cover up the excesses committed by its own military.
Absolutely, Saleh. You'd also see in the report that Amnesty has brought out that the permanent representative from Myanmar in the UN Security Council had pointed out that the international community is reporting only on one side of the story about how it has unfolded, how the persecution against Rohingyas have been carried out, systematic cleansing of this ethnic community has been carried out. But contrarily, Myanmar has not provided the access to this international community, the independent human rights organizations, the United Nations for that matter, until this time, very recently, to investigate into what has gone on in that part of the country. What we have learned is from the refugees who have fled into Bangladesh and have been staying here, sharing their stories, but there's very little evidence available except their words. And those evidences are available on the ground in Myanmar, and that has to be found out. And as Tirana Hassan in the Amnesty International report has pointed out, that Myanmar must provide access for fact-finding missions and rights organizations to get in there and do the investigations. Very recently, the Security Council was also in Bangladesh, and they have shared that the fact-finding missions are only able to carry out their report and independent investigations, but it would also require judicial investigations to bring or ensure justice for the crime carried out on both sides.
Right. All right, Saad, do continue to stay on with us. Now, Ambassador Parthasarathi, the stance that the Indian government has actually taken, I mean, we heard what the Home Ministry, in the immediate aftermath of the Rohingyas pouring into India, we are given to understand that about 40,000 Rohingyas presently reside in India as refugees. Now, the Indian government made its position clear. They said that, look, these are Rohingyas who are coming from a very disturbed region. It's possible that some of them could have been radicalized and hence could pose a security threat. How convinced are you with these arguments of the India's Home Ministry?
Look, let us be very, very, very clear. The bulk of these refugees have fled from persecution. But it is the job of the Indian Home Minister and the Indian government to protect Indian nationals.
Absolutely.
And I am very firmly against allowing them to settle down on the Jammu border. Because I have told you, I've known for a long time, including my days in Pakistan, of their links with radical groups in Pakistan and, in fact, even with radical groups in Afghanistan. And they have operated from the border. So, yes, there is a small group of radicals. We have to keep an eye on them. We have a large number of refugees who have to be handled according to international law. The taking a condemnatory position against...
But the Indian government has made its stand clear. It has said that it would like to deport the Rohingyas as soon as possible, but it has not acted upon it. Now, there's a petition also that's been filed in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, interestingly, has made its comment that Article 21 of the Constitution, which pertains to right to life, also applies to any refugee or an asylum seeker, and the principle of non-refoulement has also been brought in, where it says that if someone is seeking asylum because they are being persecuted in their country, then they cannot be forced back into their own country.
That is why I'm saying you cannot force them back, even according to international conventions. But what you are required to do is to keep a very close eye, and they cannot settle down where they want, and therefore settling them on the border with Pakistan is just wrong. Not that every one of them is going astray, but we have to be careful on that. But the more important thing is, if you just get into a position of condemning Myanmar, talking of human rights, it's going to get you nowhere. There is a Kofi Annan plan drawn up by the former UN Secretary General, which will pave the way for their return to Rakhine State. And if once that is done under international supervision, and we are committed to international economic assistance, the issues of citizenship within Myanmar can be settled later. But we owe it to them that they can live in safety and security in a non-intrusive manner without interfering. That can be done. I think, strangely enough, this is one place where India and China are more or less working in tandem. The Russians also want it done with this way. Condemnation is going to get you nowhere. Two duties we have. Those within India, keep a very close eye on them, keep them in secure places, and see they don't get out of sight. Have identity documents, total electronic.
That is an important thing, to keep very close scrutiny of those who have sought refuge in India, and also to act upon what the Indian government has been doing.
You can have biometric data on all of them. So that's not an issue in the present day and age. But the important thing is, work very hard, along with the Chinese, along with the Russians, along with the others, to see that Myanmar takes necessary action, and we are also making financial provision for these people to return. But have a very clear plan.
That's the long-term strategy. In the immediate scenario, Ramesh, if I can bring you in on this, the Indian government has taken a clear position. They've said that it is possible that some of these Rohingyas could have been radicalized, but it has not necessarily acted upon what it has actually been claiming, at least since September last year.
Point is well taken, but that said, India needs to strike the right balance between national security concerns and humanitarian crisis. Now, this is a blend of both, no doubt, but some would expect India to be in the vanguard of rehabilitating those Rohingya refugees, because India pursues the policy of neighborhood first. Whether we have come good on that policy or not is another matter, but the fact remains that this needs to be tackled at multiple levels: security consideration and humanitarian issue as well.
Ramesh, it's important here. There is one thing which the government has been saying very clearly. The Home Ministry has made its point clear that they would like to deport them back. But the question is, in terms of hard diplomacy, have we pursued that with the Myanmar government?
Is that question to me, Mohammed?
Yes, for you, Ramesh, yes.
Could you repeat that, please?
My question was, we have stated, the Home Ministry in India has stated time and again that they would like to send these Rohingya refugees back into Myanmar. But in terms of hard diplomacy, is it just all talk and little action? Because there is little that seems to be done on the part of the government in sending these Rohingyas back to Myanmar.
Well, to be fair to the Indian government, Mohammed, India has been involved, if not consistently throughout the last couple of months, in fact. But the fact that India has done what it can under the circumstances to bring succor, to bring relief to those refugees living in those camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. India is working with Bangladesh, India is working with Myanmar, India is working with the UN agencies. So India is working with at multiple levels with multiple agencies. There's always a scope of what India could have, whether India could have done more or not. That's a moot point. But the fact is that India is doing and has been doing what it can under the circumstances to bring relief to those refugees. You can argue forever, whether it was enough or not. That's another matter altogether.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Ramesh, do stay on with us. Let me bring in Saad Hamadi here, because Saad, the fact of the matter is, it is in Bangladesh, in the Cox's Bazar region that you've been reporting extensively from, that as many as 800,000 of these Rohingyas are presently staying in some of the worst humanitarian conditions that one can think of. The Bangladeshi government is in talks with Myanmar to deport them back. How far have these talks actually proceeded?
progress has happened so far. From a tangible point of view, there have been meetings that have taken place between Myanmar and Bangladesh, and are still taking place on a regular basis. Just last week, the foreign secretaries of the two countries met together, and the Bangladesh Foreign Secretary Shahidul Haq just said that they are working on the process for this repatriation to take place at the earliest possible. But mind you, there are many difficulties on many fronts. The numbers of these people, Bangladesh initially provided about a list of 8,000 refugees that they want in the first chunk to be repatriated. But the Myanmar government has not been able to come up with a verification that they said that they will do independently, and then they will take them back. So the initial numbers that Myanmar has proposed were just about 600 or so, but even that has not been considered for repatriation as of yet. So there are challenges on many fronts that the governments are not speaking at this time for the sake of the diplomacy to take place effectively, so that the repatriation happens in a sustainable manner. But there are also those challenges of children being born, like the UNICEF report that came out just last week, where it said that there are about 60 babies born every day in the refugee camps. What happens to their registration?
Right.
And in the absence of registration, they do not have their basic rights. And if they don't have a registration, there is also no identity for them, whether they are from Myanmar or from Bangladesh. So who takes the responsibility of them? So these are challenges that are not addressed, or at least spoken yet in public.
Absolutely, indeed. And Ambassador, if I could bring you in on this, the fact of the matter is, since September last year, we've heard a lot of rhetoric, we've heard statements back and forth from the leaders that we have to send them back. It is important to ensure that security in India is not disturbed, because some of these Rohingyas could have been in some ways radicalized. But the question here is, in terms of concrete steps, have we done enough, and have we done the right thing here in this crisis?
Look, refugee issues are never settled overnight.
Okay.
We kept Sri Lankan Tamil refugees for 15 years. And then they went back when circumstances improved and the ethnic conflict ended. Here, I think what Bangladesh and Sheikh Hasina have done very well is, for them, the squeeze was also financial.
Okay.
They have persuaded international financial organizations like the World Bank and others to step in with financing. One aspect has been dealt with. But on the actual repatriation, I think we'll all have to work much closer together. India, Bangladesh, Myanmar and China. And I'm quite certain it is not going to happen overnight. But as I said, there are two aspects to it.
Right.
The security aspects, keep a tight watch on them, get them biometrically checked and details with us, and then ensure that they stay where they are permitted to stay.
And also, Ambassador Parthasarathi, one of the lesser spoken facts in this entire crisis is what has happened with the Hindus there. Amnesty International claims that 99 Hindus were massacred. They were residing in Myanmar territory, so one would expect that it was the Myanmar government's responsibility to provide them with security. Have we pursued this angle enough, or can we put more pressure on Myanmar?
Let me assure you, having lived in Myanmar for almost 4 years, virtually every province of Pakistan, of Myanmar along our border is beset with insurgency.
Okay.
The extent of central government control over these insurgencies is limited. And as I've said here in the case of Rakhine State, it has obviously been done by radical elements who are fanatic and have obviously been trained in the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. So how we get after the perpetrators, we should do it. It is not going to be easy. They slip across porous borders. They can slip into Bangladesh and walk into a home of the Jamaatul Mujahideen. But I'm quite certain that Sheikh Hasina's government will not allow that to happen. They will cooperate.
I think you've summed it up beautifully, because what is important at this point of time is to ensure that these atrocities stop, that the perpetrators are brought to book. But the fact that repatriation and sending the refugees back, this is something that may actually a fair bit of time to come. I thank all the guests who've joined us. I thank Ambassador Parthasarathi, Ramesh Ramachandran, and also our Dhaka Bureau Chief Sadh Madi, who joined us from Dhaka. Thanks for watching.